Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Trawn by Ella Maven, narrated by Rachel Woods and Oliver Highpoint. Chapter 1. Leah. Wrong place, wrong time. Story of my life. At least, that was all I could think about when the massive blue alien with corkscrew horns and biceps the size of my torso yanked me against his chest and shoved his thick forearm against the fragile skin of my throat. I winced, but held still, because unlike that other human woman who had been on the spaceship with me, I wasn't trying to cause trouble. Sure, I was scared. My hands shook and my knees trembled. But in the grand scheme of things, this wasn't the worst thing to happen to me the last few days. Hell, the last year. I was unlucky as fuck. "Let her go, Drixonian," said one of the spiky-eared, caped assholes who seemed slightly nervous about my predicament. If I read this situation right, he only cared because he'd just handed over a massive amount of coin for me to the one-eyed dolphin aliens who'd been manning the spaceship, where I'd woken up groggy and restrained. The last thing I remembered before that was falling asleep on my best friend's bed after too much wine. But now, the one-eyed aliens were gone. After depositing me on this hot-as-Hades planet, they jetted right out of here as fast as they could. The arm around my throat tightened, and something sharp pricked my skin. What the hell? Well, I could add it to the split in my lip from the crack the caped leader had taken at me earlier because I'd been walking too slow. I prodded the cut with my tongue, tasting coppery blood. "No," the massive beast holding me said with a growl. I could feel his hot, hard body at my back, tensed for a showdown, with me in the middle. Fuck my life. "I know you won't risk causing her harm. Are you that good of a shot, Plykin?" That was when I realized he was moving us, shuffling us backward. I didn't have much of a choice other than to move with him. We stood on what looked like a docking station. Different shapes and sizes of spaceships were anchored to a metal bridge. To my right, steps descended to the planet floor, which was packed with flat red dirt. That was as much as I could view, seeing as I couldn't turn my head. In front of me stood about a dozen caped aliens, the one who'd spoken at the helm of the group. They all wore uniforms, had large horns that extended from their foreheads to behind their heads, and were massively tall and muscled, with mean yellow eyes. Their skin was a dull gray-green color. The alien at my back, when I'd gotten a very brief glimpse at him, only wore pants, no shoes. His massive blue feet, almost human-like, except for the clawed toenails, caged me in. The tip of his thick tail curled around my ankle possessively. "Drixo, my name is Trawn," he snarled. The caped leader straightened, and he drew a gun-looking thing from his belt. "Punishment for leaving your post is death, but the consequence of leaving with stolen property is torture. Which one will it be, Trawn?" Trawn made an odd sound at my back, a vibrating rumble, and it took me a minute to realize he was laughing. "You'll have to catch me first." I squealed when he tossed me over his shoulder and sprinted at what felt like the speed of light down the bridge. His feet barely made a sound as he sped away from the caped aliens who were shooting at us. Beams of light flashed past us, and I screamed while covering my head, as if that would do anything. I was confident if one of those laser shots hit their mark, I'd be toast. Dead toast. Head separated from body toast. I couldn't see where we were going, only the blue muscles of Trawn's broad back. His skin was shifting colors, patches of darker blue rippling all over, like a color-changing octopus. I shrieked as he banked a hard left and dove inside a doorway. He dropped me on a cold, hard floor before slamming his hand on a button on the wall over my head. Shouts echoed down the bridge towards us, and more shots rang out, pinging off metal, before the door slid shut. He didn't look at me, only ran past where I lay crumpled on the floor to the front of the structure. I glanced around at the domed ceiling and metal-plated floor before taking in the large cockpit with a panel full of lights and levers and buttons. We were in an aircraft, or probably spacecraft. Above the control panel was a massive curved window, looking out over the desolate-as-hell red planet with an orange skyline. I didn't want to be here, but I also wasn't too keen on being in space either. Trawn fiddled with the control panel, flicking switches and murmuring to himself. I eyed the door. Should I leave? Which aliens were the good guys and which were the bad guys? The caped jerks had paid for me like cattle, but this one had taken me hostage and threatened my life. Well, he hadn't verbally threatened me, but wasn't the physical act of nearly suffocating me considered a viable threat? I waited too long to come to a decision, because one was made for me. Trawn stomped toward me and plucked me off the ground like I was a doll. Wait, what's going on? Where are we going? I flailed, really not liking all this manhandling. Away from this Vetus forsaken planet. He growled in my face, black fangs glistening. Oh, God. Fangs. I went limp and stared at him. His nostrils flared, accentuating the golden studs pierced through each one. His long, thick tail swept the ground behind him, the tip twitching angrily. Flick, he muttered, before dropping me onto a seat at the cockpit. Strands of his long, dark hair, which had escaped the tie at his nape, tickled my face. Straps fastened on their own, holding me in place. He took a seat next to me and strapped himself in. After flicking a few switches, the aircraft began moving. He kept his gaze on a row of monitors, and I could see him deftly maneuvering the aircraft out of the dock. We rose in the air, and I stared out through the front windshield, wondering if I'd just traded one prison for another. A deafening crash roared in my ears just as the ship rocked violently to the right. My scream got cut off by the straps choking me. Alarms blared, and on my next inhale, I smelled smoke. Fleckers, Trawn muttered, and he seemed more annoyed than scared. This did not calm me. I felt that he should take the burning smell and ear-splitting shrieks of the alarm system way more seriously than a mumbled curse. What was that? I asked. Are we going down? He shot me an intense look that effectively iced me in place. That took skill to convey, "Shut up and be calm, you stupid human," by the set of his jaw. He pressed some buttons on the console, and a monitor blinked out before readjusting to a different camera feed. On the screen, I saw a row of those caped aliens holding massive weapons. One fired, and a streak of yellow light sailed past us. A muscle in his jaw ticked. Hold on, he muttered. What? He yanked a lever, and we shot forward so fast I nearly swallowed my tongue. I closed my eyes as I fought to breathe despite the crushing pressure. My lungs didn't want to inflate, and my heart pounded in my ears as the roar of jets crescendoed to a screaming pitch. This was worse than that roller coaster ride I'd taken at the beach with my niece. We'd gone from 0 to 72 miles per hour in 2 seconds. It'd been fun until the person in front of me threw up, and I'd unfortunately been caught in the spray zone. See? Unlucky. I hadn't planned to sleep at my friend's house those few nights ago when I'd been taken, but the wine slushy she'd made had been so strong that I didn't feel like calling an Uber. She'd given me her bed, and she'd slept on the couch. If I'd returned home as planned, would she have been taken instead of me? When I'd woken up on the spaceship, I'd been with 5 other women. We'd traveled to a beautifully lush planet and deboarded. Except the one woman wasn't having it. She pitched a fit, understandably, and bumped into me, causing me to slam into one of those dolphin-eyed aliens who had then been impaled on his own spear. Instead of punishing her, they'd proclaimed me the troublemaker and thrown me back on this spaceship to bring me to the Red Desert planet. Wrong place, wrong time. Story of my life. So of course I'd then be taken hostage by a massive alien with fangs, claws, and a growly voice, only to die on some rocket ship in zero-G deep space. For the next few seconds, minutes, hours, I focused on breathing, because that seemed like the only thing I was capable of, other than shaking with fear. I closed my eyes, unable to look out the front windshield anymore at the rapidly approaching darkness. My head swam with a mix of dizziness and vertigo, while my stomach lurched with nausea. I didn't open them until I felt a tugging on my straps. Tightness eased from my chest. I could breathe easier now. I didn't feel like we were traveling at the speed of light anymore. I blinked my eyes open, only to find a pair of deep-set black irises inches from my face. The shock of seeing his blue face, dark eyes, and fanged teeth up close forced hysteria to rise up my throat and leave my mouth in an inelegant scream. His eyes went wide at the sound, and he jerked back, while I flailed, only to topple out of the chair and land hard on the metal floor on all fours. Ouch. Shit. I swore, before scrambling to my feet on a wince. Once standing, I whirled around to face the alien. If there were anywhere to run, I would have, but the only door was the one we'd entered. The walls held a few cabinet-looking things and small panels, but other than that, we were in a one-room spaceship. The alien swallowed, his thick neck working. He held out a 5-fingered hand, tipped with black claws.
Female, I won't hurt you.
My spine snapped straight. I might have had a history of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I was no pushover. You won't hurt me? You expect me to believe that? I wrapped my hand around my throat, where I could still feel the prick of whatever sharp object he'd held there. I think we need to rewind. You held me hostage. He cocked his head and frowned. His prominent brow, which was ridged in bumps, seemed to darken.
I don't understand all your words, but I would have never hurt you. The Plikins didn't know that, though. I saw an opportunity to save us both, and I took it.
I remained wary. You held a knife at my throat.
Not a knife.
He flexed his forearms, and spikes, actual black daggers, emerged from slits in his scales. And not just his forearms. In the reflection of the glass panel behind him, I saw the spikes ran from the top of his head like a mohawk, all down his back, to the base of his tail. Fear streaked through me like a gasoline-fed fire. I stumbled away from him like a moron until I stupidly remembered there was nowhere to go. He immediately put away his weapon things. His teeth ground together before he spoke again.
I won't harm you.
Yeah, you said that already. I huffed at him, unable to remain meek and mild, even though that was probably best for my survival. But I'm sorry that I don't fully believe you. You could dice me into pieces like a hibachi chef. I gasped. Are you going to make me into an onion volcano? He blinked at me in what looked like disbelief before shaking his head.
I will prove to you I will not hurt you.
I eyed him. How closely was this race related to human males? Because in my experience, lying was second nature to them. How so? Now he just looked annoyed.
By not hurting you.
That would be great, but I wasn't convinced. I crossed my arms over my chest and stayed silent. He gestured around him.
Female, if I intended you harm, I could have done it 10 times over.
The ease with which you could slice me like tuna sashimi is not lost on me, but thanks for the reminder. My adrenaline was running low. The fear that had spiked through me had dulled, leaving me drained.
I do not understand your words,
he growled. Well, I don't understand how the hell I went to bed on Earth after one too many glasses of Moscato and woke up on a spaceship before being sold to a bunch of caped aliens on a red planet. Tears brewed in my eyes, pricking at my eyelids. I angrily swiped a hand at my face. I don't know where I am. I don't know you. A sob burst forth. I just want to go home. And then the flood began. Rivers of tears. Heaving, hiccuping wails. I didn't even see the blue guy through my blurred vision until he was right in front of me, gathering me into those massive arms of his, now 100% less deadly. I didn't even fight him. What was the point? He could kill me if he wanted. So I clung to him instead, relishing the warmth of this body. Moments passed before I felt a steady vibration coming from his chest. A chant left his lips, a ch-ch-ch sound, almost like a purr. It lulled me, easing the sobs and tears until I was only sniffling. It was then I realized he was also petting me. One great big blue hand ran down my hair, tangling in my honey-colored curls.
What is your name, female?
He asked. Leah, I said. He tried the name on his tongue, speaking it a few times in a low, almost whispered tone, before he grew confident enough to say,
Leah. My name is Trawn.
How can you understand me? And how can I understand you? He tapped behind his ear.
Translator implant. You have one too.
My fingers reached behind my ear to the lump there. The dolphin aliens had placed it there right before they dropped me off on the red planet. Oh.
But I don't know all your terms, like hibachi.
I couldn't help it. I laughed. Hibachi. It's a type of food, or a way to cook food. Something like that. He nodded, but he didn't seem to understand fully. I shifted, realizing I was sitting on his lap, across his thick thighs. His tail swayed lazily on the ground behind us. Brushing my fingers over his forearms, I looked in his eyes and said, Did you mean what you said? You won't hurt me? His body went rigid, and his eyes swirled, purple leaking into the blackness as the darker blue patches on his skin rippled. His nostrils flared again.
I would die before I hurt you, and I'll do everything I can to protect you. To do that, I need to focus on piloting this craft.
Where are we going? He helped me to my feet.
Not sure yet, but first I need to repair the damage their solar blasts caused.
Right. I'm sure this thingy will, fly better if it's fixed. He gave me a look.
Yes, but most of all, we need to be prepared for the next attack.
I froze. Excuse me? His eyes narrowed.
The Plykins will be back for you, and we need to be ready.
They'll come after us? I squeaked.
Yes. If it was just me, they might let me go. But you, they will send a fleet for you.
A fleet? His chin tilted up, and his chest inflated.
But we will not be caught.
I wanted to believe him. I really did. But what he didn't know was that he had bad luck Leah on board. I would doom us both.
Chapter 2. Trawn. The human female was a complication I didn't need, but I only had myself to blame for her presence. I glanced over at her as the ship worked through its diagnostics report to determine how much damage we'd received. Leah sat next to me at the front of the ship, wearing nothing but a thin dress. Her feet were bare, and her yellow hair hung around her shoulders in a shiny sheet. She barely came up to my chest when standing, but yet she was lush, with large breasts, thighs, and hips. I ached to see the rest of her creamy skin and shifted my weight at the unfamiliar feel of my thickened cock pressing against the front of my pants. I cursed myself and looked away. What had I been thinking bringing her with me? I was no longer the respected Trawn Warrinx, captain of one of the largest defense crafts in the Drixonian space fleet. I barely had a name anymore, but when spoken to, I was nothing but a filthy Drixonian who mined the dusty Vixlisten caves for the Plikins, along with hundreds of unlucky species from around the galaxy. Once upon a time, females meant everything to me and to my race. Our creed we lived by was, she is all. Drixonians were legendary in battle and defended our planet of Corin successfully, until a virus swept through our ranks, killing all our females and most of our adult and elderly males. I'd been one of the few elder males to survive, but the damage had been done. We fell apart without the female leaders who ran our planet while the males protected it. Having spent 50 cycles in the mines, I hadn't remembered what it was like to have a purpose I believed in. Until I saw her. Until that flecking Plikin named Jupolk struck her and I'd felt the echo of the pain in my own face, as if I'd been the one to receive his correction. After that, my single focus had been getting off the planet with her. The warrior in me who had laid dormant for tens of cycles roared to life with a vengeance. I'd given up on the hope of escape long ago, and it'd only been because of the change in routine at the arrival of the human that I'd had the chance to climb my way out of the mines to the docking station. Most guards hadn't been at their usual posts. Those who were had been distracted. And now I was in a small craft with a gorgeous human female who stirred my blood. My cock, which hadn't shown signs of life since our Drix females died, filled to hardness in her presence, and my skin tightened with an itching heat. I wanted her, but I had to keep my hands to myself. I might be nothing but a filthy miner, but deep inside, I was still a Drixonian who would never touch a female unless she wanted it. And this wasn't a Drixonian female. This was a human one. They were a fragile species, so I had to be her protector and navigator. She'd rely on me, and I'd be flacked if I let her down. I'd already installed a cloaking shield on the craft so the Plikins didn't detect our course. I couldn't be sure how long it would hold, though, and I had a suspicion the Plikins could still hack the system to determine our location. All I could do was hope we had enough of a head start to beat them. So, She cleared her throat, and her cheeks flooded with color. Where are we going? That was the question that had been pounding in the back of my head. After our civilization on planet Corin grumbled, the Aldani on our sister planet, Torin, offered us work. For many cycles, we were their law enforcement, bodyguards, and main line of defense. But when I was bloody and healing from a mission protecting some Aldani elite, they'd taken me from my bed and sold me to the Plikins. What they'd done to me was unconscionable, but what followed was worse. Arriving on Vixlisten after me were altered Drixonians, Aldani experiments gone bad. I'd heard of a Drix gladiator who went into a killing rage when provoked. Another Drix who they couldn't control, so they'd thrown in a pit. Another who they sent to a pleasure house. And yet another in the mines with me, isolated because he was a danger to everyone around him. The remaining Drixonian leadership needed to know about these stolen warriors, but I never thought I'd be in the position to escape. I had spent many nights dreaming of being reunited with members of my own race on Torin. I yearned to see my brothers, the ones I served with and fought next to. Leah's presence had been the reason I've been able to get free, but rescuing her also posed problems. I didn't know what life was like on Torin anymore. I was torn between returning home to inform the Drixonians what the Aldani had done and getting as far away from anything as I could in order to make sure Leah stayed safe. The Rinian galaxy was no place for a human female. The alternative was to take her to Corin, our original home, and start over there with her. It'd be safe, a lush planet with lots of resources and no Aldani. Not rejoining my brothers felt like I was abandoning my race, but my purpose ran deep, and that was to protect her. She was the priority, and no honorable Drixonian would ever put anything above a female's safety.
Trawn?
Her soft voice cut into my thoughts.
It's not like I know much about where we are. I'm just wondering, can I get back to Earth?
I wanted to stab myself in the eye. Of course she wanted to get back to Earth, when I'd been doing nothing but dreaming about keeping her. But with her by my side to protect, I was feeling more and more like myself. Still, I didn't relish telling her the truth. Sorry, I said. Earth is 2 galaxies away. Only the Ragul have the capability of traveling that far.
One-eyed, floppy-limbed creatures?
I nodded. Her eyes glistened and she sniffed, her small nose red at the tip before turning away to stare sightlessly out the front glass.
So, that's a no, then?
If I had the ability, I'd return you to your home. I meant it, too. She held my gaze for a long time, her pretty blue eyes wandering my face before she sighed heavily.
I believe you, she said. I don't know why, but I believe you.
I wouldn't lie to you.
I know, but just because people say they don't lie doesn't mean they don't lie.
I frowned. Do humans lie about not lying? This made her bark out a laugh tinged with bitterness.
Yeah.
I didn't like this. Well, what I say is what I mean. A smile crept over her lips, transferring her face from beautiful to breathtaking.
I'm learning that about you.
She shook her head and fiddled with her hands in her lap.
This is crazy. I have been nothing but terrified since I woke up on a spaceship, but for the first time since then, with you, I'm starting to feel a little bit safe.
She waved a hand.
After we got over the whole skin blades thing.
My machetes, I said.
What?
They're called machetes. She turned in her chair so her knees bent over the armrest. With her elbows propped on her thighs, she rested her head in her hands.
Can you tell me more about you?
I hadn't talked about myself in so long. Flack, I'd barely talked at all. My life had been the same every rotation. Wake up, dig in the mines, eat one meal, and sleep before repeating it all over again. My voice felt raspy from disuse, but I started from the beginning, how our world was torn apart by an airborne enemy we couldn't kill, how the young males who survived, along with a few elders like myself, had been offered sanctuary by the Aldani. As I talked, her face slowly drained of color and her eyes rounded. When I ended with how I'd been working in the mines for tens of cycles, her mouth dropped open.
What? She gasped. What do you mean by cycles and rotations?
Rotations are from sunup to the next sunup, I said.
Okay, so we call those days?
Cycles are a full rotation around the sun.
A year?
She smacked her hand on the back of her chair.
You've been here for decades?
I frowned. What is a decade?
10, cycles?
Then yes.
How old are you?
She squeaked. Drixonians live 500 sun cycles. I'm 300 cycles old. Her head jerked back.
Wow. Humans live a fifth of that.
In the mines, my lifespan would have been drastically reduced. I would have lived another 50 if I was lucky.
Why would the Plikins do that to you?
They had long tried to conquer us. They were never successful. They see owning a Drixonian now as a status symbol. She wrinkled her nose.
Disgusting.
Tell me about your life on Earth. Her expression immediately fell and her shoulders slumped.
Well, I'd just been laid off from my job and found out my boyfriend had been stealing money from me for a solid year. At the time, I'd wallowed in wine with my best friend thinking life couldn't get worse. Then I woke up on a spaceship and was sold to a bunch of caped aliens.
She cackled wryly.
Oh, how wrong I'd been.
You didn't deserve to be taken from your home.
She shrugged. Yeah, well, it happened. what would the Plikins plan to do with me?
I swallowed. I'd only heard rumors. Talking was forbidden in the mines, but sometimes I'd overheard guards conversing. They talked of females being given to the winners in gladiator fights. There were also pleasure houses filled with unwilling slaves, and then there was the pit, a lawless prison system where most were thrown away and forgotten about. Her fate could have been any number of things, but none good. I shook my head. I can't be sure. She eyed me.
But you have a guess.
I swallowed and nodded.
That's all you're going to give me?
You don't need to know, because it'll never happen. She pulled the corner of her lower lip between her blunt teeth and bit down.
But what if they catch us and take me back?
Her fear spread through the air like a sickly smoke. I always prided myself on my control, but at this time, pure anger surged through me, forcing my machetes to lift and my claws to elongate. My muscles bulged with the need to tear and hurt and maim. My female was afraid, and the warrior in me couldn't let that stand. I couldn't imagine what I looked like, but it had to have been shocking because Leah reared back in her chair, bulging eyes on me, every line of her body tense. A light flashed to my left just as the control panel sent out a shrill signal to let me know the diagnostic test was finished. Conversation time was over. I had to repair the craft. Forcing my machetes back under my scales, I sucked in a sharp breath. They will not catch us, and they will not take you back. Nothing threatens my female.
Chapter 3. Leah. My female. He'd called me that. As he sat hunched over a monitor, lips pressed into a thin line, while he scanned lines and lines of symbols. I replayed our conversation in my head. I didn't recall agreeing to be his at any point. Had I? And the thing that concerned me the most was that when he'd called me his female, I hadn't been terrified. In fact, my face had grown hot, and I'd found myself looking a little too long at his dark eyes and strong jaw and massive biceps. I couldn't help it. He only wore a pair of pants. All that blue, scaly skin was just there, on display, for my viewing. And what a view it was. He was sculpted, which was probably from all the shit work he'd been doing for decades. But now he'd promised all that muscle and brawn to me. Well, in defense of my person, against those caped assholes who wanted to do unspeakable things to me. So unspeakable that Trawn hadn't wanted to, well, speak of them. I couldn't stop staring at his massive, capable hands. When he wasn't angry, his claws retracted completely, which made me wonder what those fingers were capable of. For fuck's sake, Leah, really? But Bryce the asshole hadn't touched anything of mine other than my money for months. I hadn't really cared because I'd never had a high sex drive. But around Trawn, my skin felt too tight and I couldn't stop fidgeting. Had he scented the air with some crazy pheromones? What was wrong with me? But I didn't feel high or drunk or not in control of my faculties. I just felt a pull toward Trawn. An unmistakable desire to curl up in his lap and stroke his hard muscles, and then stroke other hard stuff. Shit, there I go again. Before he studied whatever report he was on, he'd given me some food he'd found in a small stash on board. The meal bar, called Teen, was kind of tasteless, but I would have gnawed on cardboard, I was so hungry. He also gave me a clear liquid that looked like water, but had a slight vinegary flavor. He called it qua, and it did soothe my parched throat. I polished off the Teen bar, as well as the qua, and felt a little bit better. I couldn't remember the last time I ate. I didn't dwell too much on the knowledge I couldn't get back to Earth. I would have to deal with that another time. So far, this was kind of like a really bad vacation. A vacation with an alien with a pierced tongue. When he ate, I caught a glimpse of 3 metal balls in a row on his tongue. But what had made me nearly choke on the quaw was when he'd unfurled that tongue to lick a crumb of food off his chin. He had the longest tongue I'd ever seen. A million questions ran through my head. Why was his tongue pierced? Who did it? Abruptly, Trawn pulled back from the control panel and stood up. I stood up too, because I couldn't crane my neck back that far to see his face when I was sitting down. Even standing gave me a muscle spasm when I peered up at him, the tall bastard. What was he, like 6'7"? I was 5'5". Then all I could think about was that meme where the hamster bites into a giant banana. I was going to hell, if I wasn't already there.
According to the report, the panel covering the landing gear is damaged. Without it working properly, we can't land.
That sounded not good. And by we can't land, you mean...
I mean we'd hurtle to the ground at the speed of light and disintegrate on impact.
I bit my lips between my teeth. Worse than not good. And I'm assuming this thing needs some sort of fuel, so we can't just orbit space forever? He gave me a look.
That is a correct assumption.
He walked past me and swung open a panel along the far wall.
No need to worry about that. I can repair the landing gear.
I hurried after him. You can? He removed several instruments and strapped them around his waist with a utility belt.
I was the captain of my own ship once. This one is a different model, but has the same basic construct.
He hooked a flexible metal cable over his shoulder and turned to me. He was just so capable, with his tool belt and fierce scowl and bulging muscles. It felt refreshing to be in his presence. No games, no bullshit, just the truth and confidence. Is it dangerous?
The repair? Of course.
Trawn! I gripped fistfuls of my hair and tugged. Don't tell me that! He frowned.
You asked, and I answered.
Yeah, but I wanted you to say something like, it's easy and there is no concern.
But there is a concern.
Okay, never mind. You're right. You told me the truth. I patted his chest, but couldn't seem to pull my hand away. So I switched to petting. Thank you for telling me the truth. But I'm worried.
I won't let you down. The landing gear is vital.
I know that, but I'm worried about you. I hadn't even realized that was my main concern until the words were out. Horrible visions of him injured and bleeding flashed in my head. And after all he'd been through, he deserved more than to die on a spaceship in the middle of nowhere, with only a useless human hovering over him. He placed his hand over mine, stilling my petting motion. His lips turned up at the corners, and his eyes crinkled. The action transformed his face, from that of a weathered scowl to a warm, kind smile. His black eyes swirled, lightening to a pretty violet that captivated me.
You're worried about me, little Leah?
Oh, for fuck's sake. Was he smirking? Of course I'm worried about your big blue ass, I grumped, refusing to look at him. I don't know how to fly this thing. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his heat through the thin fabric of my dress. My nipples pebbled, and I sucked in a breath as my senses flooded with his nearness. When he spoke again, I expected a taunt, and instead I got a soft question.
Is my flying ability the only reason you're worried about me?
I blinked up into the vibrant purple of his irises. A raw vulnerability shone through, a hopefulness that hammered at my heart until it cracked. I like you, I heard myself answer. I think you're good, and you deserve a happy future. My fingers twitched beneath his. And selfishly, you make me feel safe. His grin widened, cracking into a full-blown smile so beautiful that I forgot all about the fangs and scales and bone blades.
It's been a long, long time since I felt anything,
he admitted.
Around you, I finally feel a purpose again. I'm honored that I make you feel safe.
He swayed toward me, barely an inch, and I felt myself roll forward and rise up on my toes. His lips were there, and plush, and so full. My skin flushed with heat. With a muttered curse, he stepped back, releasing my hand so fast that I nearly toppled over at the change. I braced myself on the wall beside me. Sour confusion tangled with the warm arousal in my belly. Trawn? A shudder ran through his big body as he closed his eyes briefly. The smile vanished from his face, and when he opened his eyes, they were once again a solid black.
I'm sorry,
he said. Sorry for what? My throat was too dry, and all I could do was make a squeaking sound.
I must get the repair done before it's damaged further.
Right, I managed to say. He swallowed, his thick throat working, before he gave me a sharp nod.
Stay here where it's safe. I'll be back when the job is complete.
Okay. I didn't know what else to say. He turned away from me and opened up a hatch in the floor. He had one foot down the ladder when I found my voice again. Be safe, Trawn. Come back to me unharmed. He glanced up, and our gazes locked.
I promise, Leah,
he said. I was going to hold him to that promise.
Chapter 4. Trawn. I had almost kissed her. I could still feel the puff of her breath on my neck and the hard points of her breast as they brushed my chest. And, if I read her right, she'd been almost eager for it. I had to be wrong. I couldn't let that consume my thoughts right now. I had a more important mission than touching her soft skin, and that was making sure she was safe. I stood in the belly of the craft, assessing the damage to our landing engine thrusters. The panel covering them was dented, preventing the opening mechanism from working properly. If we tried to land now, the panel would never open. If the panel wasn't open, the thrusters wouldn't turn on, a failsafe in order to prevent the spacecraft from being consumed by fire. Likely, the Plikins aimed to damage this part of the ship on purpose. Keeping us in flight would be more beneficial to them. They'd be able to send a fleet to capture us rather than try to determine where we landed and scour a whole planet. I retrieved a toolbox from a panel along the wall and knelt down. On my ship, most repairs were automated, but on this craft, which is a smaller, cheaper model meant for short travel, it was all manual work. At least this time I'd be swinging a tool to benefit myself and not to line the pockets of the Plikins. I set to work with a blunt mallet to bang the dents out of the panel. There were scorch marks and the metal curled around holes caused by the Plikins' lasers. I was secure in an airlock. A clear hatch below me gave me an unobstructed view of space as we soared through the blackness. Above me, I could see Leah's outline through the clear door as she watched me. I'd told her to sit at the cockpit, but she didn't listen to my command. Part of me liked that she watched. I wanted to puff out my chest and roar that I was doing the right work for a Drixonian warrior and protecting his female. Not that our females hadn't been capable. They'd been our world. But we'd been their defenders, so they could live life and organize our civilization into one of the most powerful in the galaxy. I banged harder, pouring out my frustration on the defenseless panel. I stopped a moment and caught my breath. I had to stay focused and under control or I was going to do more damage. Long moments later, with the feel of Leah's eyes on my shoulders, I smoothed my palm over the flat metal. The damage was still visible, but I'd hoped it was enough to trick the sensor into believing the panel was repaired. I slid the panel back into place and pulled down the manual lever on the wall. The panel slid between the track effortlessly, revealing the final airlock hatch below. A green light near the lever signaled all was well. I exhaled with a grin. I hadn't smiled in many cycles as much as I had in one rotation. I shoved up the lever to close the panel. We didn't need the landing thrusters now, but we would soon. I turned and had one hand and foot on the ladder to return to Leah when a sudden jolt sent my body crashing back to the floor of the hull. The thrusters panel closed on my thigh, trapping me to the ground just as an ear-splitting alarm pierced the air. Pain shot through my leg as the panel continued to close with what felt like bone-crushing force. I gritted my teeth through the pain and tugged, but I couldn't free myself, not against the amount of pressure behind this mechanism. My blood pumped hot and my vision swam. I fought to stay conscious through the pain as I eyed the lever. I couldn't reach it, not while my leg was trapped in the floor. "Flack!" I roared. How had a simple repair turned into this? What had hit her ship? I froze. Leah. Was she okay? I peered up to see Leah's face pressed against the clear panel, her little fist banging on the surface. Was she hurt? "Leah!" I shouted, but I knew she couldn't hear me. I couldn't hear her either. Her mouth moved and her hair was in a tangled, chaotic mess around her head. I had to get free. She needed me. Suddenly, the airlock opened with a loud whoosh and Leah tumbled down the ladder in a jumble of limbs and hair. "Are you hurt? In distress?" I gasped out, around the pain shooting up my spine. Her eyes bugged out. "Me? I'm fine. You're the one who's in trouble." "You need to get back up to the main hull," I said through clenched teeth. "It's not safe down here." "Yeah, I can see it's not." She glared at me as she ran over to the lever. She gripped the handle with both hands and tugged. It didn't budge. She gaped at me. "Why won't it move? I saw you open the panel with this lever." "You can't be down here. What if—" "I'm not going back there while you're stuck. Now tell me what to do." "Harder," I answered, not sure if that would work or if the panel was now locked in place against my leg. "Harder?" She took a deep breath and shook out her arms as she eyed the lever. "Okay," she muttered to herself. "You can do this, Leah." She wrapped her hands around the lever and this time used her body weight to hang on the lever. At first, she did nothing but dangle in the air until finally the lever dropped. She hit the floor with a thud just as the panel slid back. I gasped, and my vision whited out as blood rushed back to my lower leg. Pain, fire-hot and nauseating, raced through my body. Hair brushed my face. Little hands grasped at my shoulders as she tugged to pull me away from the open panel. She couldn't budge me, but that was enough of a wake-up call for me to come to my senses. I stood on my one good leg and stumbled toward the ladder, bringing Leah with me. "Up," I managed to say as the pain settled into a pounding throb. She scrambled up the ladder, and I hobbled after her. The skin on my thigh, covered in much finer scales, was dark and angry, but the pain was subsiding. By the time we pulled ourselves into the hull and shut the airlock, I could just barely put weight onto it. Still, I collapsed onto my back, staring up at the domed ceiling as I wondered what had just happened. "You're sure you're not hurt?" I asked Leah. She knelt next to me, her expression pinched as she took in my leg. "I'm fine." "What hit us?" "The system said space debris. The alarm went off and I tried to yell down to you, but I couldn't figure out how to open that stupid door until after it hit us. The sensors detected the debris too late. Who knew spaceships had blind spots?" I groaned and reached down to prod my leg. "I should have been more aware. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, but like hell I was going to leave you down there." She sat with her arms crossed over her chest, her chin set with stubborn determination that made me want to kiss the fleck out of her. I've been so worried about protecting what I considered a fragile human female. I hadn't taken into consideration she'd be able to hold her own, that she'd help me. She'd tumbled down that ladder without a moment's thought of her own safety. She'd been worried about me. I wondered what my former friends would think if I told them a human female saved me. They'd probably tease me, then ask to meet her. "Are all human females like you?" I asked her, the pain in my leg receding. I could have used some medis, but I'd have to rely on my body's natural healing abilities for this. She blinked.
Like me? How?
Brave. Her thin eyebrows arched on her forehead.
Brave? No, I'm not brave, and human females are...
She waffled a hand.
They come in all varieties. Brave, shy, smart, athletic, all different.
Well, I like your variety. She laughed and shook her head.
You're crazy. You could have done so much better than me.
She sighed.
Anyway, how's your leg?
She stared at it.
Why doesn't it look injured anymore?
It's healing.
That fast?
Yes. She pointed to the cut on her lip.
This thing won't heal for days, and you nearly have your leg crushed by what looks like a garage door.
I rose to a sitting position and thumbed the split skin marring her plush lips. I wish I could kill him for striking you.
I'll be happy if we never see one of those aliens again,
she said. Me too. Our gaze locked and held. She looked away first, her cheeks flushing. I found I liked that color on her. After running another diagnostic test to ensure the spacecraft repair was sufficient, it was, I set the ship on autopilot so both of us could get some rest. I would have given anything to ditch the spaceship, as I knew the Plikins would have a way to track it, but my only advantage was a head start. They'd take half a rotation at least to gather their fleet. Their ships took time to prepare and fuel. Hopefully, in 2 more rotations, we'd be safely landed. On what planet? I wasn't sure yet, but we were headed toward the twin planets of Corin and Torin. I'd decide when we grew closer. Leah's pale skin had already been marred by dirt, but her fall in the filthy belly of the craft had left streaks of grease on her hands and knees. Her hair clumped in random knots, and while I thought she was beautiful, I could tell she was bothered by her appearance. She continually fussed with her hair with a look of disgust on her face, and she licked her finger before rubbing at the filth on her skin. This craft should have a cleanser. I retreated to a section of the hull marked with a familiar symbol and pressed the button next to it. A nozzle descended from the ceiling and a nearby control panel lit up. I gestured to her and beckoned her closer. Here, this will clean you.
A shower?
She asked.
Where will the water go?
Water? I echoed her word, which didn't translate for me.
Yeah, liquid that I wash with?
I shook my head. No liquid. Where would it drain? She nibbled her lip as she cast a look around.
Good question.
Stand here, I told her. I will show you. She stood awkwardly, toes wiggling on the hard floor.
Should I undress?
The cleanser would clean her garment, but it would do nothing to repair the holes and rips. She'd plucked at the fabric often, and I got the feeling she didn't like it. You can, I said as I pressed another button on the panel. A shelf slid onto the wall, holding a stack of clean clothes, still wrapped in their clear sanitary packaging. I took one and ripped it open with my teeth. The shirt was massive and would hang down to her knees. Would you like to change into this? She took the shirt from me and ran her hand over it. The material was much thicker and softer than what she currently wore. A small smile stretched her lips.
Yeah,
she said softly, and when she lifted her face, her eyes were wet.
I would.
Are you sad? I asked. The last time your eyes leaked, you were unhappy. She let out a surprised burst of laughter and swiped at her cheeks.
No, I'm not sad. Sometimes humans cry when they are happy, too. I'm happy to be out of this disgusting dress. To me, it symbolizes not good things. I wish I had my own clothes, but wearing something you handed me is much better.
I liked that she was honest with me. I could see the slight difference now. Her eyes were merely shining rather than dripping copiously, and a smile tinged her lips. You can remove your dress, I said. I'll turn around to give you privacy. When you press this button on the panel here, a strong current of air will wash over you from the nozzle overhead. It will clean your skin and hair. She eyed me with skepticism.
Air?
It's a condensed air that's been charged and filtered. This is the main method for cleansing in this galaxy, and one I'd only been allowed sparingly while on Vic's listen. She swallowed and dropped her hands to toy with the hem of her dress.
You can turn around then.
I would have given anything to stay where I was and watch as that hated fabric revealed her body to me, but she hadn't chosen that. She might have accepted me as a traveling companion, but not as a mate. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I had to live with that. I turned on my heel and listened with rapt attention at the sounds coming from behind me. The rustling of fabric, the sound of her hair swishing over her bare back. My cock thickened and my mouth went dry. I needed to do something to occupy my mind or I'd go insane. I took a step away just as the air turned on with a loud gust. A feminine shriek cut through the air before the air shut off, and I whirled around, machetes out, ready to slice into anything that hurt my female. Instead, I found no threat, only the pretty human who consumed my thoughts standing under the cleanser completely naked. She stared at me wide-eyed, and I stared back at her, unable to tear my gaze away even though I knew I should. Her breasts were plump and luscious, topped with dark pink nipples I ached to draw into my mouth. Her belly was round and soft, while her hips flared out, giving her a curvy shape that made my cock leak. Her thighs were thick, nearly hiding her sweet cunt nestled behind a bed of light curls. I would have given up just about anything then to taste her.
Trawn?
She whispered just as one arm crossed over her breasts while she covered her cunt with her other hand. "I'm sorry," I said, still unable to look away from all that flesh on display. "I thought you were hurt."
No, I was just surprised. The air is strong and...
She swallowed as her gaze dipped down my body.
And hard.
"It is," I murmured. "It's very hard. But it does the job. Adequately. More than adequate." I curled my hands into fists at my sides to keep from reaching out to her. "You'll be cleaner than you've ever been."
I don't doubt it.
Her voice trembled.
Not one bit.
It took all my strength to say my next few words. "I'll turn around again, so you can finish." She blinked.
Yes, I'll finish.
I turned around. The cleanser sounded again, and I closed my eyes as I prayed to Thetis for self-control.
Chapter 5. Leah. I had never been the most modest person. I wasn't an exhibitionist or anything, but I never really cared about a nip slip or whatever. I had great tits, so why not show them off a little? But Trawn, seeing me naked, felt like something else. Something bigger. Something meaningful. His gaze had held a naked lust. But for a brief moment, desperate longing had swept over his expression, and that was what snared a hook into my heart and tugged. He looked at me like he wanted to kneel at my feet and worship me. It had been too much, way too much, and I needed him to turn away before I did something crazy like throw myself at him. I couldn't seem to wrap my brain around the fact that he was an alien, and we were on the run from enemies who wanted to do us harm. It was like I skipped right over that and accepted this was my new life, which was nuts. My need to survive must have forced me to adapt quickly. So when did become massively horny enter into my survival skills? Maybe I had some wires crossed inside or something. I didn't remember Bear Grylls needing to rub one out in the desert while he drank his own pee out of a snakeskin. I quickly shrugged into the shirt Trawn had handed me. It hit a bit above my knees and was a soft, warm material that immediately made me feel slightly less like a kidnap victim. I shook my hair out, surprised at how soft and clean it felt. In fact, I felt clean all over. After collecting myself, I stared at the tense muscles of Trawn's back as I cleared my throat. I'm finished." He turned around, and his gaze raked over me from head to toe. His jaw clenched, and he gave me a tight nod.
"If you don't mind, I'll use the cleanser now."
I stepped aside. Of course I don't mind. He didn't even wait for me to turn around. He dropped trow immediately. Just right there, in the middle of the floor. Every inch of his blue-scaled body was on display, from his muscled abs that I drooled over already, to his bulging thighs and his, good God Almighty, pierced dick. I stared, unable to take my eyes away from the thick girth and low-hanging balls. A large silver ring was pierced through the tip of his cock, but even the weight of it couldn't pull down his massive erection. The inner walls of my pussy clenched, imagining how all of that would feel sliding into me. I gulped and finally lifted my gaze to find him watching me. He didn't touch himself or make any move toward me. The heat in his nearly neon violet eyes licked at me like flames. With a quick jerk of my chin, I spun around and gave him my back. I could have looked at him all day, for multiple days, weeks, months, but I forced myself to keep my distance. I didn't know what his customs were like. I didn't think he'd hurt me, but the idea of giving up physical control to a different species scared the shit out of me. I listened as his footsteps approached. The cleanser turned on, then off. A rustling sound followed as he pulled his pants back on and stepped into his boots.
"Leah,"
his deep voice called, and I slowly turned around to find him standing tall and proud. Now that he was clean, I realized his color had been dulled by red dust from the planet. His hair, now loose around his shoulders, shone a vibrant raven blue-black, and his scales gleamed a vivid blue. He was beautiful, no longer the beaten-down, growly alien he'd been when he first held his machetes at my throat. "Trawn." I fluttered my hands at my belly before clasping my fingers together. "You look good." He raised a nubbed brow, and his lips twitched.
"You too."
After giving me another round of privacy so I could use the toilet, or, as he called it, the expeller, he then pressed a button on the wall, and a massive horizontal plate slid out of the wall. I didn't realize what it was until he pressed another button, and a pad on top inflated. A bed.
"You can get some rest,"
he said, turning down a corner of the blanket like he was a hotel bellboy.
"I'm sure it's been a while since you've slept."
It'd been days of catching a few hours here and there, but who was counting? "Where will you sleep?"
"There's only one bed here."
He shifted his weight, and the color in his cheeks darkened.
"This ship is meant for 2 pilots who take shifts."
"But you need to sleep too," I protested. He blinked languidly.
"I'll be fine."
I was tired. Now that I was clean and dressed in something soft and warm, just the sight of the bed had me nearly salivating. Trawn fingered a dial on the wall, and the lights dimmed. I took a step toward the bed, but the thought of getting on it alone unsettled me. My stomach churned. Sleeping was such a vulnerable time, and the thought of laying there alone made me feel exposed. "You can lay with me if you'd like. There's plenty of room. I don't move much when I sleep." His chest heaved, and his ab muscles contracted.
"I don't."
"Please?" I hated the pleading in my voice, but he hadn't lied to me yet, and so I wouldn't lie to him. "It feels like eternity since I felt safe. I'm not sure I can fall asleep without knowing you're right there." That did something. His eyes fired, and his spine snapped straight.
"Then I will lay with you until you fall asleep."
My nerves calmed. I placed a knee on the bed and smiled up at him. "Thank you." He sucked in a breath and settled onto one side of the bed on his back, with one hand tucked behind his head, the other resting on his chest. There was no blanket to cover us, which was fine. I'd had worse the last few days. A soft pad felt like I was living large now. I curled into a ball on my side next to him and studied the outline of his face. Just beyond was the cockpit, and space yawned in front of us, pitch black, dotted with distant stars. A shiver ran through me, and Trawn jerked his head, brow low in a frown.
Are you cold?
A bit, but it's okay. I'll be fine once I fall asleep. Except as I lay there with my eyes closed, I couldn't fall asleep. I'd thought his presence would be a comfort, and it was. But his proximity stirred something else, too. Like my libido, which hadn't dulled one bit now that I knew what rested behind the bulge in his pants. My eyes creaked open as I let my gaze stray to the object of my thoughts.
Human, if you don't stop looking at my pants like you're trying to see through them, I might just take them off and let you look your fill.
I snapped my gaze back to his. My embarrassment at being caught switched to annoyance that he'd called me out on it. I glared. It was his fault anyway, just laying there, all attractive and stuff, and hung like a fucking horse. It's not my fault you got naked in front of me. How am I supposed to think of anything else now? He rolled onto his side and propped himself up on his elbow.
You're thinking of me nude?
Of course I am, I snapped, irritated at his smirk.
Would it make you feel better if I told you that I have pictured 1,000,000 ways to make you come in the brief time we've been laying here?
No, it would not, I huffed. The amused gleam in his eyes annoyed me, and turned me on at the same time.
No?
No, because picturing it does nothing for me. Why was I poking the beast? I didn't stop, even as his smirk dropped off and his lips curled into a feral snark. Maybe I want you to do more than picture it. Are you up for that? That was either the wrong thing or the right thing to say. I'd know soon enough, because in the next second, the beast pounced. He descended on me like a conquering warrior who was owed his spoils from the war. His lips surged against mine, his tongue immediately demanding entrance. I let him in, because I wanted to be his. In this moment, regardless of consequences, I couldn't imagine not exploring the magnetic pull between us. Our tongues tangled, and he moaned deep in his throat as his hard length pressed against my stomach. The piercings on his tongue tickled mine. My core clenched, and I clung to his shoulders, digging my nails into his scales. He pulled back long enough to spear me with a heated look.
Let me taste you, Leah. Please.
You are, I murmured, eager for more. He shook his head as he skimmed his fingers down my shirt to press over my pussy.
No. Here. I want to taste your cunt.
My whole body went tight with desire. Out of all the aliens I came across, I found a species that did oral. That wasn't the kind of luck I was used to. I had to make sure I was hearing him right. You mean, taste me? With your tongue? I asked. His nostrils flared.
Yes. Is that not an intimate act humans perform?
I wasn't going to get into that with him. It is. You can taste me there. His lips curled back, and his fangs gleamed. I was about to ask him if he knew what he was doing, before he slid down the bed, threw my legs over his shoulders, and buried his face between my thighs. At the first lick of that broad, pierced tongue across my pussy, I arched my back on a scream. He latched on like he was on a mission, like the folds of my pussy held the elixir to immortality. He swirled the balls of his tongue around my clit and sucked. I nearly levitated off the bed as fireworks flashed behind my eyes. I gripped his silky hair in my fist and bucked into his mouth. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, he left my throbbing clit alone and speared my entrance with that long, pierced tongue. "Trawn!" I cried, just as his tongue began to vibrate. A rumbling purr that originated in his chest rose up his throat and down his tongue to set my whole body alight. I didn't have control over my limbs anymore. I flailed and screamed and thrust against him. I wanted to come, but I also didn't want this to stop. I hung on the precipice of mind-numbing pleasure until he growled while thumbing my clit with his other hand. At that, I detonated, my vision shorting out as waves of desire coursed through my body. My inner walls clenched down on Trawn's thick tongue as he worked me through my orgasm. When my back finally collapsed onto the bed and my fingers fell away from his hair, I was wrung out and exhausted. Swiping his mouth with the back of his hand, Trawn loomed over me. I expected him to leer at me with a self-satisfied smirk, but instead, his eyes swirled a light purple, and his ruddy cheeks were tinged with a deep violet, while his swollen lips were parted in awe. He brushed my hair off my face and pressed a chaste, precious kiss to my forehead.
"Beautiful,"
he murmured there, his lips swishing back and forth across my skin.
"So beautiful. Thank you for giving me that."
Giving you that? I huffed a coarse laugh. I should be thanking you. I reached down to return the favor. When my hands closed around the hardness in his pants, he went still. I froze too at his sudden stiffness. "Are you okay?" I asked him. His dick was a steel rod in my palm, so I knew he was turned on. He swallowed.
I've never done this."
I blinked at him and slowly withdrew my hand. Done what?
Touched a female. Or been touched. I hadn't found my mate yet, before the virus came.
But surely... I let my voice trail off, thinking he'd finish. Instead, he only tilted his head in confusion.
Surely what?
Weren't there other females? Another species? He only shook his head. My heart pounded. I had a virgin alien? For real? But you knew what you were doing when you touched me. His lips curled into a soft smile.
Drixonian warriors were always known as legendary lovers. Every generation, elder males pass down their knowledge and customs to us.
Well, that explained the piercings, then. I reached for him again. You tell me what you like, then, because I haven't had any lessons with your, anatomy.
I don't remember what I like.
His words were soft. What do you mean?
When our females died, our libidos died with them. I haven't been hard for many, many cycles, until I saw you. And before that, I'd never released my seed.
My eyes nearly bugged out of my head, and I jerked to a sitting position. You've never had an orgasm? My voice was reaching screeching levels. He shook his head. I felt like I was going to hyperventilate. This was too much pressure. What if I hurt him? What if it didn't feel good for him? It would be just my luck to fuck this up. But then I looked into his eyes and saw nothing but trust there, adoration, and a whole lot of lust. We'd figure this out, but like hell would I give him blue balls. Well, his balls were already blue, so I wouldn't give him purple balls, or whatever. I carefully pushed on his shoulders until he lay flat on his back on the bed. His tail curled around his hip, and the tip slowly flickered back and forth at our feet. He'd already released the clasp on his pants, which rested over his tail, so I easily tugged down the waistband until his cock flipped free, rearing up, pierced and proud between us. He was long and girthy. An odd node sat at the top base of his cock, and when I brushed my finger over it, he shuddered. The tip of his cock leaked a copious amount of clear liquid that felt like lube. I closed my fist over the head of his cock and stroked down to cover his shaft with the slick. He groaned, and his hips rocked. Does that feel good? I asked on the upstroke.
Yes,
he hissed, and his tail thumped on the bed, as if to emphasize his answer. I wasn't a sex goddess by any means, but I knew my way around a cock. While this one was supersized and pretty much a work of art, it worked the same. I continued to stroke as Trawn's hips churned. When I cradled his balls in my other hand, his back bowed off the bed. Captivated by his blissed-out expression and bunched muscles, I wanted to give him more. Everything. This alien who was more than twice my size had cared for me and respected me, and I wanted to give him everything I had. Without warning him, I bent down and sucked the head of his cock into my mouth. His whole body bucked, and on the next upstroke, he came on a roar. I swallowed as much of his surprisingly sweet-tasting cum as I could, but when it got to be too much, I pulled my head back and let the rest dribble down his shaft. I crawled up his body, and his glazed eyes immediately sought me out. He gripped my face in his giant palms and pulled me down for a tender kiss. There, he murmured against my lips,
"Thank you, my precious human."
Precious. I was his precious. I'd never been precious to anyone. I curled up against him and tucked my face into his neck. His tail wrapped around me possessively, and I closed my eyes. For a moment, I let myself revel in my good luck at meeting Trawn, and didn't let myself think about when that luck would inevitably run out.
Chapter 6. Trawn. I stared at my female sleeping next to me, in awe of the way her light eyelashes rested on the tops of her cheeks. Her small hands curled under her chin and her lips were slightly parted in sleep. She'd gifted me so much. I could still taste her sweet cunt on my tongue and feel the heat of her lips wrapped around my cock. I wanted her again, now. But she needed a rest, and I needed to focus on getting us as far away from Vic's listen as I could. I'd gone from the feeling of needing to protect a female to needing to protect her, Leah, my brave human. My purpose was singular and focused. She was the priority now. I ran my fingers through her golden hair, amazed at the way the strands shone in the dim light. After a lifetime of pain and anguish, I finally found something good. My Leah. Anyone who wished to do her harm would have to kill me first, and I was damn hard to kill. Without rousing her, I slowly rose from the bed. She remained in a tight ball, her breathing deep and even. Retreating to the control panel, I sat and stared out the clear front panel, assessing my options. Earlier, I'd sent a message to Shep, an old friend of mine and a trusted healer, but all the comms came back undeliverable. The only accessible receivers were Aldani. I cursed. I couldn't imagine the Dirksonian had been defeated in a battle with the Aldani, but their loss of access to the Galaxy network was concerning. I felt pulled in two directions, between loyalty to my warriors and to Leah. Returning to Torren to assist the males of my race tugged at the logical side of me, but with each pounding echo of my heart, Leah's safety rose to importance. I looked back at her where she lay with her soft skin, sleeping peacefully because she said I made her feel safe. Me. I'd made her a promise, and I intended to keep it. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't go to Torn to track down the members of my race, knowing that I could be putting her at risk. I'd take her back to Corrin, and we'd build a life together, just the two of us. Once we were safe on Corrin, I'd reconfigure the comm system so that the Plikins couldn't track it, and I'd find a way to get in touch with the warriors left on Torrin. I didn't know what awaited us on my old home planet, but I knew I could hide us in my territory. My fingers sped over the control panel as I redirected our destination. With a final tap, the decision was made. Our course was set. I couldn't take her back to Earth, but I wouldn't place her into a war zone either. I checked to be sure our cloaking shield was still on and that it hadn't been hacked by the Plikins. So far, so good. Unable to remain away from Leah for long, I retreated back to the bed and lay down next to her. Immediately, her body curled into mine, and she hooked a leg over my thigh. I fell asleep with the smell of her hair in my nose and the feel of her silky skin on my scales. We woke to the sound of alarms, and I knew immediately that we'd been found. Leah jerked up with a scream, and I tore off the bed to take my place at the control panel. I immediately turned on every monitor and saw a large Pliken cruiser bearing down on us. The good news was there was only one. Maybe the commander hadn't been too eager to waste many men chasing us down.
Let the story pause so your spirit doesn't have to. This music is for your restoration, and this audiobook is a gift to you.
Leah flew to my side and gasped. I didn't make a sound. This was my element. I'd fought many enemies, including the Plikins, while defending my home planet. I didn't have the technology or defense craft that I'd had back then, but I could work with what I had.
Trawn?
Leah's voice shook. I flipped the switch to charge the laser weapons. The advantage I had was that the Plikins didn't want to kill us. They wanted to board us and take Leah. All I had to do was keep them away and use what little weapons this spacecraft had. I accessed the weapons control and locked the laser target onto the Plikin cruiser, aiming for the thrusters. The cruiser was too large for a cloaking shield, while ours, as I'd suspected, had been breached. The Plikins likely assumed I didn't have knowledge of this craft's defense system. They would assume wrong. They had no idea a former Drixonian fleet captain had been toiling in their mines. I set the tracking on the Plikin ship and fired. An explosion rocked our smaller craft, and for a moment I thought we'd been hit, until the monitor on the screen showed a giant fireball in the Plikin ship in pieces. Leah clapped her hands over her mouth, eyes wide, but I didn't celebrate yet. I searched for more ships, surprised that the Plikins would have only sent one after us. Maybe a human wasn't worth a fleet. My answer came a moment later when a metal crunch sounded above us, and we both would have crashed to the floor if it wasn't for the straps holding us in place.
What was that?
Leah shouted. I knew exactly what it was, just as a giant tear along the seam in the ceiling ripped open with a deafening screech. We were being boarded. The Plikins must have sent a smaller shuttle and attached it undetected to the top of our craft. Leah screamed just as 4 Plikins dropped through the hole to land on our floor with a thud. I ripped off my seat straps and tore Leah from hers before shoving her behind me. I had nowhere to hide her on this tiny ship, and so I was all that was standing between her and a lifetime of servitude on Vix Listen. It would never happen. The Plikins normally had solar guns, but not in deep space, as there were no sun rays to charge them. They were taller than most Drixonians and strong with a thick skin that was hard to cut into, especially around their neck. Well, they had long blades in their fists. What they didn't have was my machetes and my motivation. Jupolk dropped down behind them, his cape swirling around his booted feet. His soldiers didn't wait for orders, as he'd likely already given them.
Kill the Drixonian, take the human.
I surged forward as they came at me with their long, useless blades. They thought I was meek back on Vix Listen, but I hadn't had a flecking thing to live for there. But now, I had a female, and not just any female, but Leah. Leah, who was my sun and my purpose. I'd orbit her for the rest of my life, ensuring she burned bright. I didn't even feel the blades sinking into my skin as I slashed at 2 of the soldiers with my machetes and swept a 3rd off his feet with my tail. The 4th fell victim to my head spikes before I finished off the rest of them. The battle was over before it really began, because a Drixonian warrior was powerful alone, but with his female to protect, he was unstoppable. And in that moment, I was that warrior. Leah's shout drew my attention away from my blood dripping down my legs from a wound in my thigh to see her lash out at Jupolk. He'd slithered by me as I'd fought his soldiers, and now he held her with a laser gun pointed at me. He must have found a way to charge on remotely. Anger surged through me, but I kept control of myself. One shot of that gun and I'd have a smoking hole through my chest.
I see now I should have sent more soldiers.
He sneered in disgust at the bodies and shook his head.
This is sad, really. You Drixonians and your females. Always with the protecting. I thought you'd be over that, but the first thing you do when we show up is protect her.
I wasn't paying attention to his words, not really. I was looking for a weakness, any weakness. I only needed one. Let me take her, and I won't take you back. You'll be free and clear. I weighed my chances of getting to him before he could fire a shot off in my direction. They had a slight trigger delay and were hard to aim accurately without an intense amount of training and practice. Leah struggled, her face darkening as she sucked in breaths despite Jupolk's forearm at her throat. The terror in her eyes nearly killed me, but then something else passed over her face and her lips pressed into a thin line. She jerked her chin down and then slammed her elbow in Jupok's ribs. He grunted at the impact, and I pounced. My machete sliced right through his wrist, holding the gun, and it clattered to the floor, his lifeless fingers still on the trigger. Blood arced in the air, and Leah screamed just as Jupok's pain shriek filled the air. I picked him up by his throat until his feet kicked uselessly in the air. "You think caring about females makes me weak?" I snarled at him. "But I know the truth. It makes me stronger than you can even imagine." I squeezed until his eyes bulged, and his arms tugging at my grip weakened. Only then did I drop him to the floor in a heap and swipe my machetes across his throat. His eyes held mine as he gasped and gurgled his final breaths. When his eyes dulled, I rose to my full height. I turned to find Leah crouched on the ground near the bed, her arms wrapped around her chest, eyes locked on Jupok's lifeless body. I immediately went to her and drew her into my arms. Her entire frame trembled, but she didn't shy away from me. She wrapped her arms around my neck and held me tight. "Are you okay?" I asked. "That was so brave what you did."
"You're bleeding,"
she whispered. "I am already healing." My wrist burned slightly, and I flexed my fist behind her back. The burning intensified, though, until the pain made me suck in her breath. Leah gasped and withdrew her arms from around my neck. I thought it was a reaction to me until I realized she, too, was wincing and rubbing her wrists. "What's wrong?" I asked. My answer came a moment later, when her wrists began to glow.
Chapter 7. Leah. My wrists burned badly, like 1,000 bees had stung me. I studied them and couldn't find the source of the pain until, well, some crazy shit happened. I wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it with my own eyes, but I did, plain as day. 2 parallel black lines ran around my wrists, like an invisible tattoo gun was etching them into my skin. They hurt, but I was too stunned to move, as the lines, about 2 inches apart, met where they'd started, creating a band on each wrist. Then the pattern of swirls and loops started between the 2 lines. I stared up at Trawn, but he wasn't looking at my wrists. He was staring at his. I dropped my gaze to see that marks identical to mine were now etched on his wrists. When the pattern covered the entire way around my wrists, the lines flashed a bright light before darkening to a yellow gold. The pain faded, and I was left with golden tattoos matching Trawn's. My head ached and felt crowded, like someone else was in there, which sounded crazy, but probably no less crazy than magically appearing wrist tattoos. My mind felt fuzzy, but there was an unmistakable presence, like a blue mist. "Trawn," I whispered, my voice hoarse. What is this?" He looked stunned, with his eyes wide and face paled. He swallowed convulsively as he flexed his fists before lifting his gaze to me. "You're my mate," he said. "Mate?" I asked. "I just can't believe it," he murmured to himself. "Phaetos has chosen us for each other. The locks prove it." "I'm sorry, you gotta slow down," I said. "Phaetos? Locks?" He took a deep breath.
"Phaetos blesses us or curses us, depending on our actions. She gives us what we deserve, and she is determined I deserve you, which is the greatest gift I've ever been given."
I ran my fingers over my markings, which didn't hurt at all anymore. The skin wasn't raised. They were like completely healed tattoos. Is that what these mean? He gripped my wrists and rubbed his thumbs over the patterns there.
"These are locks. They mean that you are my Cora Eternal."
My implant roughly translated that term to forever heart, which made my belly warm.
"Locks are rare. Once in a generation rare. We always chose our mates, but sometimes Phaetos saw something in 2 Dricks that made her push them together. Those were given locks."
This was so much. A lot. but I couldn't deny the pull I'd felt when I initially met him, and how everything about him felt right. But why did the locks appear now? He shook his head.
I should have seen it. When the Plycan struck you, I felt the blow myself, as if he'd struck me. That started the bond. When I killed him, the one who drew your blood, the bond was confirmed.
I didn't look at the bodies on the floor. I kept my gaze on Trawn. So what does this mean?
This means you are my Cora Eternal.
The worship in his eyes held me in a trance.
I will care for you and protect you.
He swallowed, and anguish streaked across his face. The mist in my mind dimmed and shimmered.
Unless you don't choose me.
Hey! I gripped his face. I choose you. This is all a lot to process, and I'll need some time. But I've come this far. He ran his hand over my hair, then drew it back with a cringe.
I'm not fit to touch you. Let me dispose of the bodies, and then we'll use the cleanser.
I offered to help, but he refused to let me lift a finger. He returned the bodies to the shuttle they'd landed on our roof. After cleaning the floor and repairing our ceiling, he sent their shuttle coffin off into space. After that, he led me into the cleanser. I didn't shriek this time when the air blasted us, but instead kept my gaze on my big blue mate. Yeah, mate. He was mine, just like I was his. His Phaetos had said so, and while I wasn't sure who or what she was, I couldn't deny she'd made a good match in us. His lips captured mine as the air sent our hair swirling around us, mixing the blonde and black strands in a tangle. His cock pressed thick and insistent against my belly, and I wished for more room to climb him like a tree like I wanted to. With a slam of his hand on the cleanser button, the air turned off. He lifted me on a growl, and I did my best to wrap my legs around his hips. He took us to the bed, where he dropped me down on the pad with an eager reverence.
My Cora Eternal,
he murmured against my neck.
I can't believe I'm so lucky. Phaetos chose you for me, and you chose me back.
His big palms squeezed my breasts before his head ducked, and he sucked a nipple into his mouth. I cried out as his tongue piercings rolled around the stiff peak, sending hot bursts of pleasure straight to my clit. The mist in my head bubbled in rolling bubble. What is this feeling I have in my head? I asked, unsure I could even describe it.
Those are our auras,
he murmured against my breasts.
The locks, they let us feel what our mates are feeling.
You can feel my emotions? He grinned at me.
Like a golden syrup in my mind, you are sweet and hot.
Oh, God. I strained against him, eager for friction. And hell, I'd been a good, patient girl, but it was time for some good old-fashioned impaling. His tail slapped the bed beside us as his hand slipped down to toy with my pussy. He pulled off my nipple and gave me a feral grin just as he flicked my clit. Please, I tugged on his shoulder. Please take me, Trawn.
Does my Cora Eternal want my cock?
He taunted. You know I do. He squeezed my hip.
So soft. All mine.
All yours, Trawn. Your Cora Eternal. His lips curled back, and with a feral snarl, he lined up his cock at my entrance and plunged inside. I gasped as stars flickered behind my eyes. The mist of his aura shuddered and pulsed. He stretched me to my limits, and the piercing at the end of his cock slid deliciously along my inner walls. He didn't just get to fucking. He rolled his hips and angled just right until I screamed at the first touch to my G-spot.
That's it,
he growled as he began to fuck me in earnest.
Get yourself off on my cock. Feel how hard you make me.
I writhed against him, clutching at his arms and his hair. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, something latched onto my clit and sucked. I bucked and looked down to see that node on his cock working my clit like my own personal vibrator. After that, I couldn't speak, only take what Trawn was giving me as he fucked into me like an animal. Waves of pleasure beat through my body until I was coming like a geyser, my mouth open in a wordless scream. Trawn's hips stuttered and his growls deepened until they vibrated the whole bed before he came on a roar. The spacecraft filled with our panting breaths. I stared up into the face of this alien who'd managed to take the worst luck of my life and turn it into something beautiful. He slid down to my side and held me against him while pressing kisses to my face, neck, and hair.
"I will do everything I can to make you happy," he said. "We're traveling to my old home planet, Corin. No other warriors, just you and me. I'll make us a life there, and when I know it's safe, we'll reach out to the rest of my race. I won't risk your life traveling anywhere else until I know you won't be harmed."
I knew he'd said the rest of his species were on the sister planet. I had thought he'd want to travel there, with me in tow. "Are you sure?"
"I'm positive," he said. "The course is already set. You, my Cora Eternal, are my priority now."
I'd never been anyone's priority. I marveled at how much my life had shifted course in a short amount of time. I gripped his face and brushed my thumbs over his sharp blue cheekbones. If I can't get home, then I choose to spend the rest of this crazy life adventure with you. For once in my life, luck is on my side. The tilt of his head was cute.
"What is luck?"
"Luck is like your fortune. I guess some people think it's like your fatas. You get the luck you've earned. But some people just have bad luck. That would be me." I grinned. "Until you. I guess it took leaving Earth and meeting a Drixonian warrior before my luck changed." He grinned.
"Well, then I'm glad to be the reason for this good luck."
For once, I didn't think about what could go wrong. With Trawn at my side, I could handle anything. So that was how I viewed what was to come, as we hurtled through space to set up a new life on a new planet. I was a whole new Leah now, and I finally had luck on my side. This concludes Trawn by Ella Maven, narrated by Rachel Woods and Oliver Highpoint. Copyright 2020 by Ella Maven. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Ella Maven, care of Corvacero Literary Agency, and was produced in the year 2023 by Tantor Media Incorporated, a division of Recorded Books, which holds the copyright thereto. Please visit tantor.com for more information on our growing library of unabridged audiobooks.